Hello, this is Colette with Witch Ways, and I want to thank you all for joining me for this very informal session. My computer is in the shop with its lovely editing program, so this is just going to be very informal and unedited. Today is a question and answer session, and I want to thank my students and my email list people for sending me a lot of great questions to answer. I had way more than I could actually include in this video, so I will probably be doing another session in the future. If you have questions that you would like answered, be sure and put those in the comments below. I check really frequently and we can just go forward and I will answer them right there. All right, let's get started. So I have my list of questions here. So my first question that I received was, do you suggest connecting to deity, spirits, and angels right away, or building a practice on your own first? So there's lots of pros and cons to both those ideas, and I got a lot of questions actually on deity, so I'll probably do another episode on that. Either way is fine. I would say the advantages of waiting are that you have a better sense of trusting yourself and your own perceptions, developing your own authority before you start accepting guidance from other beings. You have a better sense of what feels true to you, and you might feel a little more confident in your practice. The advantage of jumping right in is that you can get a perspective from others, other beings, and it is important to remember that not all beings who are out of a body have a PhD. Just because they're not in a body doesn't make them wise. And so it is important to have some sense of how to perceive whether this is a being that has your best interest at heart. So I think that's a good way to go. Another thought about that is that the advantage of working with beings and deity right away is that it can really deepen your practice and give you perspective, and you get a lot of information and viewpoints that you might not otherwise get. With my first year students in my program, what I do is I start out with really basic deities. So I start out with working with the earth as goddess, star goddess, because most people have some deity in their background, in their lineage somewhere, even if they don't know that name, that can come to them and help support them. But many people don't work with deity at all, and that is totally fine. You can work formally or just acknowledge and offer respect, whatever feels right to you. Be sure, since this is a big topic, to, if you have any follow-up questions, to post them in the comments. Okay, question number 2 is, I have a hard time finding time to practice. Any thoughts? Who doesn't? Especially these days. So one of the things that you can do is just work real simply. So that might be when you step out of a car or off your bike or out the door and you feel your feet hit the ground. Just acknowledge that you are a magical being and feel yourself in connection with the earth. You don't have to do a big procedure, just foot to the ground. I am a child of earth and I am a magical being. And just that alone can be really, really helpful. You can also reflect at the end of the day. Just take a minute at some point. Often I find these minutes when I'm in the bathroom or brushing my teeth, when I'm really busy, to pay attention to what happened to you magically during the day. The other thing, and this takes a bit more time, is to just have a few minutes to quickly jot down your thoughts or anything magically that occurs to you. And so what I do is I have a journal nearby. And someone brought up a good point the other week about if you have a really fancy journal, like I have a really fancy journal, people don't tend to write in it quite as much. And so I have two journals. I have a book of shadows that is kind of fancy, and I put my finished things in it. And then I have just a notebook that's just a line notebook that's open to the day that I'm working, and just there's a pen right there, and I just jot a sentence down. And then later, if you have time, you can go back and fill in. But even those brief notes can make a real difference. Okay, question number 3. I don't know any witches, and I'm not sure I want to work with any. Do I need to have a coven to have a magical practice? So the short answer to this is absolutely not. Being a solitary witch is a fine and established tradition. You don't. And one of the things you can do these days to get magical information and get input from others is there are so many online forums on Facebook and TikTok and Twitter and Instagram to follow and be included. And just to get some feedback, you don't even have to post, but just really, seeing what other people are doing, because I feel like in this culture that doesn't really support spirituality, even though being solitary is perfectly valid and wonderful and very rewarding, it can be hard to get the kind of support and validity that you might feel otherwise. The other thing is there are amazing amounts of witches on YouTube offering videos that you can watch and get ideas from. So, question number 4. Lately, I've been uninspired. Is that something that others feel? So really, that this time right now with COVID and everything going on in the world, it can feel really hard and people just get busy. I am experiencing a lot of people just kind of feeling at the end of their rope and not having any more energy to just do another thing. And that can really contribute to feeling uninspired in your practice. Another thing that I wanted to say about that is that that's just normal. Witchcraft and spirituality and all those things kind of come in waves, for me at least, and for others I've talked to, where sometimes you'll be really feeling it and really inspired, and you'll be getting lots of ideas and information and doing ritual all the time, and it feels great. And there's other times it just feels like crickets, 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 just silence on the magical front. And I think that's normal. And one of the things about that I want to say is it is important to have a spirit-earth balance in the style of witchcraft I work with. I feel like earth and spirit are equally valuable. One is not better than the other. So use it as a time to tend to this temple that is your body. Use it as a time to take care of your physicality. It also might be a time that you do some research and read just some books, or, see what others, like I said in the earlier question, are doing online, and just kind of use that time, because that can be really difficult to do, to find the time for as well. Okay. And then one more thing I want to say about that is relish that time. It can also just mean that you are in a crossroads before you move into a different phase of your magic, or it can be a crossroads where your body and spirit is taking some time to integrate what you've already done, and before you bump up to the next level. Okay. Question number 5. Why isn't Mary recognized as deity? And I want to just say that in many cultures, she is treated, honored, and respected as deity, particularly in countries that are more Catholic in origin. So when I was in Mexico, certainly people there really treated Mary as a deity in her own right. And I think the person who was asking the question probably was referring to witchcraft. So when people come to witchcraft, whether they're working with Wicca or working just with witchcraft as a magical practice without spirituality, I feel like sometimes they can have a lot of baggage and bad associations with Christianity. And while I firmly believe that all faiths have value, for many of us, Christianity has been very instrumental in oppression of indigenous people around the world, in its role as a colonizer and enforcing the taking away of indigenous land, indigenous spirituality, and indigenous rights. So I feel that justifiably many of us have some kind of hard feelings about Christianity, and that may carry over to deity. And I just feel like, yes, of course, Mary is a deity, and I don't work with her personally, although I did once have a very powerful dream that she showed up in, explaining that she was just another face of the goddess, and she gave a whole list of goddesses, that she was just the latest face in a long line of names that had been called on to access that energy. So my question is, my answer to that is like, yeah, why not? If you feel it, she is. Okay. The next question, number 6, is what is a pentacle, or what is the origin of a pentacle, and what does it represent? So that's a really huge topic. And I did do a video fairly recently talking about some of the aspects of that. Mostly I focused on a spell working that you could do with a pentacle. So I'll try and go into a little bit more detail here. This is a complex topic. So pentacle is basically a star, although that wasn't always the definition of a pentacle. It's a very old symbol, the star is. It's been used in churches, in architecture. It's hundreds of years old. Its roots that we know of go back as far as the Mesopotamian times in Sumer and Babylonia, and made their way to Europe through the Greek and Roman conquest and invasions of Western and Northern Europe, and also just through trade and through people going to study in other places. So the first time we see it really being used in witchcraft per se, where it's written down, which doesn't mean it wasn't used in witchcraft earlier, is in the 1500s. There were some grimoires or magical books written that talk about pentacles. And this is the place where they are not always 5-pointed stars. Although they're referred to as pentacles, they are many, many, many different shapes. And they were more seen as a charm or a protective agent. And the French and Latin origins of the word pentacle seem to corroborate that, where they really support that idea that it's a charm or something that you carry to protect yourself. So pentacles are associated with protection. They have been used historically to enhance magic or to aid in summoning spirits. There is more recent history around using the pentacle in the form that we currently see it, which is the star embedded within a circle. Probably comes from 1850s at the very earliest, but more likely around the early 1900s, when people started working with that particular symbol more commonly, and it shows up in the Rider-Waite deck as a symbol for discs or coins. And so these days it is a symbol of faith. Historically, the 5 points of the star, once it actually became 5-pointed, have been used in Christianity to represent the 5 senses or the 5 wounds of Christ. I personally think of it as a 5-pointed star because 5 is a number of change. You have the stability of the 4, and then in order to create change, you have to have a shift, and that 5 is inherently a little unbalanced. I would also say that stars as magical symbols, 5-pointed, 4-pointed, and with more points, are found in cave art on several different continents. The star itself has always been a symbol of hope. And for me, it really represents the magic that is the origin point of our human physicality in this incarnation, in this universe. It's the idea of stars as our oldest ancestor. And also one of the origin myths I work with talk about the star goddess making love to herself and creating the universe with her orgasm. And I feel like, to me, the star is a really nice symbol of all those things. Probably there's some information to consider. It's like some of the idea of using pentacle in witchcraft may have come from the idea of Christianity saying that the star reversed, a pentacle reversed, is associated with Satan, and then that sort of bled over into witchcraft. But that's not a topic I know a lot about. Okay, question number 7. I have a hard time relating to the concept of deity. Can I do magic without invoking deity? And so I talked a little bit about this before, and the simple answer is yes, of course you can. Many witches do not work with deity at all. They do not work with the concept of the goddess or gods, and it is just a practice, a very special practice, but it isn't tied to faith. My style of magic is tied to spirituality, and I do work with the goddess, but I certainly do lots of things that are just daily practices that I don't necessarily associate in my mind with my spirituality, although at this point in my life it's hard to separate it out. But there's tons and tons of people out there that in no way work with other beings at all and have an awesome magical practice. So I would say that's a very personal choice and is something that you can play around with and see what works for you. I often advise people who are unsure about that deity concept to work with the idea of what is it that they conceive to be deity. Is it the living earth? If they want to explore that idea of deity at all. Okay, Thank you all so much for watching and sending me these questions. If the technology gods support me, I will be having some summer solstice videos coming out and a whole lot of videos about the lusciousness of roses if all goes well. Take care of yourselves. Thanks for watching. Leave your questions in the comments and be well.